Well, thank you very much for the invitation and for giving me the opportunity to talk, and possibly, at least at first glance, a little bit in contradiction to what the title of the conference says. Multipolarity. It suggests that there had been some unipolarity, some contradiction in terms. A unipolar system cannot exist. Poles on an axis are always more than one. And it makes sense if we do not speak of poles of an axe, but of a different pole that is concerned with sail, and that is about monopolies. And this is a different thing than unipolar system. There had never been a unipolar system. There had been a monopolist system, namely, especially that of the United States and its satellites, at least if we look at the recent history after 45. There's another reason for not speaking of a unipolar system, that is the working class. That was one of the poles in capitalist societies, and it is still. And I think this is something that we always have to keep in mind. What the monopoly or the monopolist system had been, that was a Rostovian model of development, taking the United States, the political economic system of the United States as general pattern, as blueprint for the world. And if everybody stands on the tiptoes, nobody will be able to see better. Meaning, if the so-called developing countries really catch up, the United States or the model would be in trouble. So actually what happens, or what was part of this system, was under Gunnar Frank said, it's the development of underdevelopment. Just keep them down, keep them underdeveloped, and then the capitalist system can develop further. Now, what we face today, I think it is important that we are confronted, witnessing serious new developments. The industrial system as it existed is not really anymore in place. We just heard about the shifts in production that are very important in terms of sectorial movements. If taken seriously, we are confronted with a fundamental shift that is concerning the understanding of what productivity means and what the characteristics of economic activities are about. And I think this is something where we actually have to think as well, next contradiction in a way, that we are not talking about a unipolar system, but that we are witnessing unifying trends. If we want, if we don't want, we are confronted with major problems, and this is we on this planet Earth. It had been mentioned as well in terms of climate change, of nature, how to deal with nature. It is about artificial intelligence, digital industries, and so on and so forth. And all this, I think, is important as a global challenge we cannot solve on our own. No country, no region. And I would say these are major trends in terms of looking for something of unification. Being forced to develop a new understanding of wealth. Karl Marx, first sentence in the Capital of the first volume, speaking of wealth in terms of the production of commodities. This had been as well mentioned earlier. And I think we have to distance ourselves in political economy, in critical political economy, from this concept. Today, we have the orientation still on production of goods, of commodities. The three sectors: agriculture, production, industrial production, and services. We are now at a stage where we have something new, something that I would call tentatively a development of new forms of intermediating, of connecting, of something as well that is connected with intelligence services, of a different understanding of what wealth is about. And wealth is about, not least, about something that is concerned with the development and the leap development of the productive forces. That we are actually forced to produce something that is societal wealth. And we see this already for a long time, but increasingly, that we have actually, coming to China, some orientation on societal wealth, on integration with nature, and we have an increasing crisis, or plural crisis, in the Western world. And the Western world is, unfortunately, not only the developed Western world, but it is as well the so-called developing or part of the developing countries, that we are confronted with problems with migration that are causing serious problems, not because of the migrants, but because of the inability of the existing capitalist system to deal with it. And it is quite natural or systemic, we could go into an analysis of this, that capitalist systems are not able and are not willing to do exactly what I said before, to allow other people to have a share in the wealth. So this is something where this orientation on a social, societal wealth goes back actually to something that Friedrich Engels said. Production, or the economy, is about the production of daily life. Production of reproduction of daily life. And this means as well, and we are becoming more and more aware of this as a global issue, this means that we have to overcome anthropocentrism. We are important, but we are not more important than the planet we live on. Because if we destroy this planet, we will not be able to exist anymore. A very simple thing. So what we have to do is to look at the new development, at the new underlying developments that we cannot clearly see today. Marx wrote Capital, in which the working class is assumed to be the central historical force at a time when the proportion of the population employed in industry, including capitalists, in England and Wales was about 8%, calculated according to Capital 1, only slightly more than the proportion of servants. A year after the manifesto was written, the proportion of workers in crucial was even only between 2 and 3%. So where are we standing today when we are looking at traditional industrial processes, the meaning of it, the traditional service industries, and neglecting, I think this was an important part of the previous presentation, neglecting actually the development of new productive forces, and that means as well, not denying the ongoing role of the working class, but it means as well that we are looking, or have to look, must look, at the shifts in class relationships. I think this is important to take up the challenge of a new political economy, analyzing processes that had been mentioned in the previous presentation, analyzing thoroughly those processes that are linked to the relationship to nature. And it is something as well linked to the question of property relationships. I think it doesn't matter if I'm a little bit shorter probably than foreseen. Francesca Macchiala and Yung-Si Liu in a paper mentioned the importance of state-owned enterprises. I think this is something that we have to look at as well in these terms of it's not just the property as a formal issue, but in terms of controlling national and global social process, socio-economic processes. This is, of course, a huge problem in a way in terms of living in a global world. We cannot act on our own. We're always under this pressure of others. But at the same time, we have to deal with that. We have to address these issues. State-owned enterprises are important. This is a major problem, I think, of the near future. And it is shown actually as one of the crises in the West, the privatization of services. And I think this is something where we have to, in countries like China, in contexts like BRICS and others, we have to be very careful to address this issue, this challenge. But I think there is another point. Speaking now for the small, forgotten people, I'm actually from Denmark. This is a country, you can put it into probably in one, you can put it into one of the Chinese cities. Tiny place. It is not a major force. And I think this is something why I say it in this context, we should not forget small economies. And we should not forget that even in countries like China, in all the countries, there are groups that are not the major groups. Even if we consider the huge progress made in China, we have to think as well about those who are not in the main industrial sectors. How to deal with it? I'm economist, I'm lawyer, but I'm not Chinese lawyer, or I do not know enough about the Chinese challenges, concrete. But this is something as well in the context with the sectorial, with the innovative developments. With Paul Boccarat, French economist, I discussed his concept of, in English it is, employment and education. This was the right to education. And I think this is something where we have to think as well, if you look at the material resources that are there, we have money enough, resources enough to be spent for education, to be spent for culture, and to develop, to be spent for political processes. We have to develop this further, we have to develop issues there. Employment is important, but is not only one. Employment is about quality as well. It is about workers' involvement in processes. Frege Haug spoke of a perspective of 4 in 1, meaning the one person has issues about employment, about cultural participation, about political participation, and about reproduction, families. There are different concepts in this, and I don't suggest that Keynes was a Marxist. but he said about, I think it's 95 years ago, he said, we don't need to work as we work 40 hours and more. I think he came to a calculation with 15 hours. Why not use the opportunity, why not use the wealth we have for a distribution and redistribution in the productive area and come from there to increase actually the quality of employment and the quality of life and the quality of our societies. Thank you.